Welcome to Plead the Facts, presented by KI Legal. On today's episode, Michael Iakovou, co-founder of KI Legal, is joined by Josh Berger, commercial broker at Bobrow, to discuss commercial retail trends in the hospitality, cannabis, and office spaces.
Welcome back, everyone. Mike from KI Legal. I'm joined with
Josh Berger.
Josh Berger, the infamous Josh Berger.
Infamous.
I think one of the more interesting asset classes that has come to the forefront the last, we'll call it 12 to 18 months, federally, but also here in the city of New York, has been cannabis.
Yeah.
Cannabis lounges, cannabis sales, licensing issues. There's a whole slew of considerations. What are you seeing? They're popping up everywhere.
Yeah.
What they are in every iteration depends, right?
Again, my favorite word as a broker is it depends.
Yeah.
The good brokers tell you why it depends on what.
Yeah.
Right? But there's such a challenge right now because licenses are so restricted in New York as a dispensary.
Well, there are none at this point in time, right?
There are no licenses, but even when they come out, they will be restricted to a small group.
Correct.
Right?
And for those of you who don't know, restricted to people who have been, have gone through the quote-unquote system related to a marijuana type crime. Those are the ones who are bumped to the front of the list because it's almost like an affirmative action type of.
Yeah, I think that the concept on that front also is it's kind of like trying to bring the gray market, into a better place. And the reality is, like, if you look at any business, right, and you say to someone, "Hey, you've never been in this business before. Why don't you start this and you'll be our licensees that we're going to give it to you. You're going to be our guinea pigs." How well do you think that's going to go?
It's going to be a disaster.
It's going to be an absolute nightmare. So I think it was a smart move in saying, hey, let's get some people with some experience, even though it's a little gray market.
Sure.
Right? Because obviously before now it was all black market, right? Yep. To say, hey, let's get them with some experience, so at least we can get those rolling. And then you'll have players who are kind of getting into the space, more officially on the non-gray market.
Yeah. So again, a gray area of the law as it stands today, October of 2022.
Very
it's
good.
Going back, it's going by so quickly. The selling and purchasing of marijuana, right? $1 for marijuana exchange is illegal in the state of New York. It's not illegal to smoke marijuana, and that kind of brings me to my next question or next point. Is we see a lot of consumption lounges, private party events happening, pop-ups, right? And what's interesting is they're integrating the cannabis subculture or culture, we'll call it, with other things like art, right? Yeah. Music, anything hospitality, which doesn't need any introduction or review. That's what KI Legal does. It's one of our biggest client bases, hospitality and restaurants. So it's a natural nexus. So
correct, and I think that touches on the grayness of the market and the situation right now, right? Because even like you said, technically it's illegal for that $1 for a joint transaction.
Quid pro quo. Yep.
Quid pro quo. Yeah, see, that's why he's the lawyer. But they're actually not enforcing those laws right now. So it's an interesting thing. Again, on the legal spit from
right now.
Right.
Those are the operative words, right?
Absolutely, right now. As soon as these licenses are given and dispensaries open, the administration is going to come down hard on these, these corner stores who are selling a joint, or the Cannabis. Have you seen these?
I have.
Right, it's an old school bus that's converted into a weed store.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
they're all over the city.
They're everywhere, right? And so they're not getting shut down right now because the city's not. It's not a priority for the city. Once the new licenses are out, and that's starting to be done in a legal fashion. Yeah. I think that stuff's going to get shut down pretty quickly.
Yeah. So a whole bunch of things to I guess extrapolate from your last statement. Like, one is landlord considerations, right? So you're a landlord, right? You have debt, you have financing on your property. The sale of marijuana, federally speaking, right? Forget about New York for right now, but federally speaking, is illegal. It's a federal crime. Although just this past week, the Biden administration, decided that they were going to pardon a whole bunch of
marijuana offenses.
Yeah. And so we see where the federal kind of mind frame is going, and then in the United States there's something called the supremacy clause, which is federal law will always trump local and state law. Naturally, the states, the various jurisdictions, whether it's I know New Jersey is very much ahead of New York when it comes to marijuana. California,
obviously Colorado,
exactly. But that being said, I do anticipate, and again, I don't have a crystal ball, but I do anticipate the state of New York, right, passing this legislation in advance of federal, because federal you got to work out 50 states, all the different territories. It's a big
I would agree very much, and so the challenge, like you said, with owners is that if you have debt on your building, you cannot take a dispensary as a tenant, right? Because that's just the way it works. So different landlords, if they have debt on their buildings, it's challenging. So some landlords are structuring deals where they have a deal with a company that's not technically a dispensary.
It could be
with an assignment option.
Okay.
Right, with an assignment option once they get their license.
Very smart.
Right?
I like that.
Right.
That's the workaround.
There's always a workaround, right?
So I was just going to say, on its face, if you're using the bodega example, your main core business is quote unquote selling sandwiches, right? They do a lot of bodegas now do sell other weed and whatnot.
Yeah.
But it's not like if you look at the use provision of their clause, it doesn't say for the sale of marijuana and related cannabis items, right? We're not seeing that just yet.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say was the use clause, right? Because you even in an assignment, you have to be compliant on the use clause, right? So again, that's not my department. That's your department.
Yeah.
And then another thing that landlords are doing when it comes to the actual rent during that period is they're saying, you know what? While you're still waiting for your license, while you're still waiting for that, we'll give you a reduced rent, right? Once you get your license, we're going to kick it up to full rent, right? But it's interesting, owners don't want to be left behind. And a lot of people, it's a huge industry.
It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. I mean, there's no question. It's not going anywhere. It's only coming more out into the quote-unquote light. So it's going to be interesting to see how landlords kind of, straddle the line, quote-unquote.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm just thinking this right now, but let's look back, after Prohibition was ended.
Sure.
Right? And see what kind of angles and directions that they took in order to kind of.
Well, you went from speakeasies, right, to a bar on every corner, a bar and pub on every corner.
Exactly. So that's I think we'll have a similar, not the same, but a similar trend.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So where are you seeing most of these? I guess from a neighborhood perspective, most of these cannabis
Great question.
Locations popping up.
Yeah. So we talked about Williamsburg earlier,
Yeah.
right? They're everywhere in Williamsburg. There are legal dispensaries there now because right now marijuana cannabis is legal if you have a medical card.
Sure.
Right. So those dispensaries do exist, right? And so there's 3 or 4 in Brooklyn. Williamsburg, you have a lot of these new cannabis shops. You'd find it in like Soho. You'll find it in East Village. You'll find it in the West Village. You're not finding it really in Midtown, like in the Plaza District, 50s, East Side. You're not really seeing it in Hudson Yards. You're not really seeing it, Penn Station because
I'm seeing them here in the financial district.
Financial district, yeah, also, yeah,
100%.
Correct.
They're all over the place.
And I think also you look at residential density, right? And after financial district has become a tremendous place for people to live.
And
right?
Why is that? Yes, it has. But why does the financial district work? Think about it from a zoning perspective,
Correct.
Right? The SLA, the State Liquor Authority, is going to be the governing body, at least in the state of New York, that's going to be issuing these licenses and, in short, policing them to a certain extent.
Right.
And one of the things, like when you're applying for a liquor license, is your proximity to schools,
Yep.
right? And they have released preliminary guidance on what the qualifications are going to be. And what's important is, like, when your broker is underwriting a potential opportunity for a cannabis consumption lounge, that he or she looks at that, right? How
Right.
close are you to a temple, to a church, to a school?
Correct.
Right? Those are going to be right away on its face denials. And, at that point, you've spent a lot of potential time and money.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. People are going to run into a lot of brokers who are, I hate to say it, terrible people. They don't care about your business.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to speak for lawyers, but, there are a lot of.
We're all angels.
You're all angels,
Yes.
Exactly, because they take a better, harder test, so they're all angels. Yes. Precisely. Anyways, you're going to have brokers who are going to say, yeah, sure, it'll be no problem, or yeah, I'm sure it'll be fine. Those are like key words that you really need to listen out for.
Yeah.
If someone's like, it'll be fine, don't worry. No, the answer is let's have our attorney look at it, make sure what our risk is, because if you're committing to a 10-year lease, that's a big freaking commitment.
Of course.
Of course. And if you, like, I had a situation with a school who, that's a whole different conversation, but they hadn't been pushing so hard on applying certain rules for certificates of occupancy.
Sure.
Right. In the last couple of years, the rules haven't changed, but the school, the Department of Education decided to start coming down harder on these people. I have a client who I was introduced to after the fact, who can't do a change of C of O because of a whole bunch of different things. She's now still committed to all 10 years of that lease.
It's crazy.
Right? And so you got to be really careful to not commit to a long-term lease on some brokers like, hey, I'm sure it'll be fine. Or landlord even saying it'll be fine. You got to talk to the right people about it.
100%. And another major point that I would like to bring up as it relates to cannabis is if you are negotiating a lease, you need to make sure that there's condition precedents, right, for an eventual cannabis license being issued. Because even though federally, it's all going to make this moot. We just don't know when federal law is going to pass. And again, if I was a betting person, New York and every other state is probably going to pass things much more quickly than they will on a federal level.
Yeah.
So that being said, we're operating in this gray area right now, and that's a whole separate conversation as to the do's and don'ts of doing that. But if there has to be that condition, that contingency. So if it's like, 24 months from date of signing, so you can still operate, but then if you have an out clause as a tenant, in the event that the SLA doesn't give, and again, licenses are going to be tight. There's a whole slew of different things that the SLA is looking at as to who gets a license. If you're a woman, minority, past offender, marijuana, cannabis related law. So, if you're banking on just getting one, I can tell you unequivocally, I know very, very, we'll call it wealthy people who are trying to get into the space, but by the time they spend all the money on attorney's fees, on expediter fees, on brokers, etc., federal law will have already passed. So it's just things to look at in terms of what the value and what the juice, the squeeze.
Is the juice worth the squeeze?
There you go.
There we go. Finally, it took two of us, but we finally finished one statement.
There you go.
Okay, cool.
So cannabis again, interesting space. Any closing remarks that you'd like to make?
Just keep your head on a swivel. Don't listen to someone that says trust me, and talk to the right people. Just to make sure you're not putting yourself in a bad position long term.
Yeah, and on that point, it is important, it is paramount that you work with counsel that firmly understands the cannabis law that's changing, we'll call it monthly at this point, SLA guidance, hospitality laws, commercial real estate, commercial leasing, joint venture agreements, because it all rolls into one. If you're not working with that type of lawyer, you're going to have issues. I can tell you that much.
More expensive issues later down the line.
Correct. So that's it. Stay tuned for more cannabis-related real estate news, and we'll talk soon.